everybody. It being Wednesday, October 30th at 6:30 p.m., I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Before you guys call your meeting to order, we need to do a roll call because Dawn is remote. Let's do that after. Let's do the roll call first. So Eric here.
Tyler here.
Kim here. Missy here.
Don here.
All right. Do you guys want to open up?
I'll open the Finance Committee meeting tonight. Carl Pike here.
Michael here.
David here.
Debbie here.
All right, and now we will do...
Derek here.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Anybody else?
Oh, microphones. Yeah.
Guys, you gotta put your mics on.
Yeah, make sure your mics are on.
Derek's online. It looks like Jonas is online too.
Is there anybody else online from FinCon?
Just Jonas right up in the
Jonas
top
and
right
Derek.
corner.
Top right.
So it's
Yep.
Derek and Jonas.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so now we'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before we get started, we have a few announcements. This meeting is being recorded by the local scene. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should notify the chair at this time. I'm seeing nobody. Financial assistance applications are available on the town's website or by calling the Selectmen's office. For anyone interested in volunteering, there are several vacancies on various committees and boards. To see a complete list of the openings, please visit our website at kingstonma.gov. Also, please check the website for any additional events or notices. Again, it's www.kingstonma.gov. In just a moment, we're going to start open forum, but before we do that, I know there's been a lot of chatter today about what it is that we're going to be doing tonight. So I just want to let everybody know that the purpose, our meeting tonight is really to get the budget process kicked off. In years past, we've had a budget advisory committee, which has been just single representatives from various boards. Finance committee, selectmen, school committee, town administrator and whatnot. I think the treasurer was involved. But we made a change at our special town meeting in October 24th of 2023. So the big change is that it's no longer a budget advisory committee, but a joint meeting. So I'm just going to read it right as it read out of the warrant. So by November 1st of each fiscal year, the Board of Selectmen, the Kingston School Committee, and the Finance Committee shall meet to review the 5-year financial plan and discuss and delineate their budget parameters for the coming fiscal year. So what does that mean? In years past, what we've done with the Budget Advisory Committee is that group has usually met in like September, from my recollection, September, maybe early October. And coming out of that process, we would have direction in terms of what we thought the town would be able to handle. 3% across the board, 4% across the board. Some departments may be higher for special needs or whatnot, but it would come up with goals for the year as we're all starting our budget process. And everybody is starting their budget process pretty much now in November. Schools get kicked off with their budget process, usually December, and everybody has a final budget sometime in March that's agreed upon in theory by Finance Committee, School Committee, Board of Selectmen, and then posted to the warrant for the town meeting to make the final judgment. So again, so tonight we're not going to be talking about specific cuts. We're not going to be talking about specific, at least I don't think we're going to be talking about specific budgets for any specific department, but try to come up from a high-level view, a holistic view of where we think the town could go. I mean, we've got some big budget challenges over this coming year. We've had apartments that have come in. We've had students go into the schools. Not a lot of revenue to cover it, so schools have gone up. We have some more costs for police this year. And then we've had budget issues, or we've had financial issues with sewer. Sewer rates have gone up, so a lot of our residents have seen higher sewer rates. We've got some projects coming up with wells and water tanks, so there's going to be money needed there. So we're just heading into a challenging time, so we need to discuss as a group as these committees come up with an idea of what we think the town would be willing to spend. And as we mentioned last year with the very big budget increases we had last year, that we thought that there would be overrides needed this year just for level services going into '26. We're not there yet, but we need to discuss that tonight and see how much money we have in the taxable levy to spend, and whether we think we'll need a override, and whether we want to keep under an override, or if we think we should push for an override. So, and we may not have a decision tonight, but hopefully we'll have some direction from the folks who are here in terms of what we think we're gonna do. So having said that, now I'm gonna go to open forum like we always do. Anybody is welcome to speak about any topic at all. It's your discretion what you want to speak about. If you just want to wait, that's fine too. But if anybody wants to speak in open forum, just raise your hand. I'll recognize you and we'll ask you to go to the podium. And we'll also open it up online as well. Anybody in the room for open forum? No? Do we have anybody online that wanted to speak? I can't see if hands are going up. Oh, okay. All right, doesn't look like it. Okay, so I think our one appointment tonight is the joint meeting. And tonight we just have the Finance Committee. The Kingston School Committee could not make it tonight, so it's just going to be the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. Carl, I'm going to pass it over to you if you have anything you wanted to start off with.
Thank you, Eric. I just have a couple of general points that I'd like to make before we really get into the discussion here. Number one, kind of as Eric indicated here, that I see this, the Finance Committee sees this meeting as a first pass on attempting to provide guidance to the town administration on where we think the budget should perhaps be headed. The number one item, as I had said last year, when you use up a lot of your levy capacity, your excess levy capacity, you go into the next budget year with a very tight position, so that if you want to do anything above 3%, chances are you're going to need a override, a Proposition 2.5 override. Proposition 2.5, as most everybody knows, allows us to increase taxes 2.5% each year. Our new growth, the additions onto your homes, any kind of commercial development that comes into town, our new growth usually gives us around 0.5 to 1%, so that we can usually do about 3.5% budget increase without much of a problem. When you have excess levy capacity, let's say you have $1.5 million of excess levy capacity when you've finished one budget year. That, in effect, gets carried forward so that you start the next year off with some reserve, in effect, for being able to do more than 2.5% without having a real issue. So what I did with this, to try to get we had a Finance Committee meeting about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and one of the things I wanted to do to prepare for the Finance Committee meeting was to bring forward what I call pro forma budgets for the year FY26. And that's nothing more than looking at, okay, if we did a 3% bottom line increase, what would that do to our excess levy capacity? That if we did a 4% increase, if we did a 5% increase, if we did a 6%, in round numbers, a 3% bottom line increase, that's an increase from last year, from this current year's budget, of 3% for everything, including schools. And of course, it wouldn't have to be 3% for everybody. It would be a bottom line 3% increase. That would maintain about $700,000 in excess levy capacity. To give you an idea of what that means is that in prior years, the town of Kingston, going back to 2018, we had 1.9 million in excess. 2019, 0.9 million. 2020, 1.2 million. 2021, a million even. 2023, 1.3 million. 22 was 1.3 million. 23 was 2.6 million. 24 was 2.9 million. This past year, with a very high percentage increase for the education budgets, we came down to, we're currently looking at approximately an $800,000 excess levy capacity. So what that does is says that if we had a 3% increase, by my calculation, we'd be at 700,000 excess levy capacity. So we would maintain what we're coming into this year with, but we wouldn't be building it up. A 4% increase would be just about break even, that we would be using every last dollar plus or minus $100,000 of the levy capacity. I will be honest with you, there are many communities which tax to what I call tax to the limit. Pembroke, for instance, uses almost all of their ability to tax every single year. Marshfield comes close. Conservative, good financial management will try not to do that. And that's why I gave you the history of Kingston. We've done a real good job of managing the budgets in this town such that there was always room to grow, room to play with it. Some other communities around here, Plymouth, a lot of times you hear Plymouth complaining about their taxes. Everybody's complaining in Plymouth how high their taxes are. Plymouth, over the last 3 to 4 years, has maintained excess levy capacity of $9 to $12 million, okay? If you consider that Plymouth is 4 to 5 times the size of Kingston, that's the equivalent of Kingston having the $2 million or so of excess levy. So the important thing to get out of this discussion is that 3% bottom line increase across the board would allow us to maintain the levy capacity we had. A 5% increase says that we would have a budget deficit of $500,000. 6% would be $1.1 million budget deficit. And the minute you talk budget deficit, the only way to eliminate that is by going for a Proposition 2.5 override. The next general thing I'd like to mention is the recent budget history. I think a lot of times, I may have even been at fault on. In Kingston, we tend to say the schools are always the budget problem, that the schools are why we have these issues. The schools, in fact, are about 50% of the town budget. That's normal. Go to almost every community in Massachusetts, and your school education budget is going to be somewhere between 45 and 55, 60%. If I go back to FY22, just 3 years ago, we had a budget, including education here, of $47 million. This year's budget, FY25, which we're in right now, we have a budget of $58 million. That's an $11 million increase over 3 years, or 24%, close to around 8% per year. So the town has absolutely been spending money on government services. The interesting thing to me, though, is that of that $11 million, $5.6 million is education. They have a 22% increase over the time frame. Employee benefits is 1.8 million increase over that time. That's a 29% increase. It's the cost of medical insurance, the cost of pension, retirement costs, okay? And as long as I mention medical insurance, more than you need to know. However, the piece of medical insurance that is killing this town and is going to be killing it in worse is retiree medical insurance. We pay for the medical insurance for retirees, and that number is growing much faster than the medical insurance expenses for the current workers, okay? All other increases, fire, police, streets and parks, general government, is an increase of 3.6 million. That, my friends, is an increase of 24%. I just told you the increase for education was 22% over 3 years. For everything else, excluding benefits, it's 24%. So we have been funding police, we've been funding fire, we've been funding streets, trees, and parks, and all of the other items. The last item that I'm going to bore you with, or scare you with, is debt service. Up until it was either 3 or 4 years ago, we were having general fund, the town of Kingston was spending about $2.5 million a year for debt service. A big part of that was $2 million for the intermediate school. The intermediate school was built about 20 years ago, was financed over a 20-year period. The debt for that building was paid off 3 years ago. So that for the last 3 years, we have had debt service of only about $200,000 to $300,000 a year. What that has done indirectly, it's provided more money that has get plowed into the fire and police and schools, okay? What scares me is when we talk about a Proposition 2.5 override for operating budget purposes, let's not forget that we're talking about building a new police station. We're talking about adding an addition on to the fire station. We're talking about, in fact, it's about to happen, a new roof for the intermediate school and the elementary school. The state school building authority has just approved the one for the elementary school. Those two roofs put together will probably cost close to $10 million. The state will probably pay close to half of it. So there's another $5 million of debt that will probably have to go onto the books. We're talking about road infrastructure. Should we be someday borrowing $5 million to make great improvements in our road infrastructure? We're talking about a new admin building for Silver Lake Regional School District. Take a guess, $4 million for a new admin building? I don't know. The long and short of it, I can see us looking for upwards of $30 million in additional debt over the next 3-4 years. If you finance $30 million of debt at today's interest rates over 30 years, you'll be paying back close to $60 million, so you'll be adding $2 million onto your operating budget every year. Yes, that $2 million does not come out of your Proposition 2.5 limit. However, it gets paid out of your real estate tax bills. So I encourage everybody, whether it's the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, the public, to understand that every time you do debt financing, you're adding on to the tax bills. So with that, I think that I will say that that's my general comments for my Finance Committee and for the benefit of the Board of Selectmen. And I welcome the discussion to begin.
One thing I just want to maybe see if you can clarify and help, because I know it was confusing for me the first time I was trying to wrap my head around it, is the tax levy and, the limit that we have in the excess capacity. So correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure a lot of people don't fully understand what you were talking about, but when we had $2.9 million available, that means we can use that up without having to go to an override. So your taxes go up more than, it's not that your taxes are limited to go up only 2.5% a year. That's not it. It's sort of the overall taxing of what we already have. And we could use that capacity, and your taxes will go up quite a bit, which might pretty much everybody's.
Yeah, when I say excess levy capacity, it means that for this particular year, we could have taxed another $2 million without going over the 2.5 override. And when you don't tax that $2 million this year, you in effect lose it. However, it stays in the base for what you can start off with for the next year.
Right. And it also helps our bond rating, if I'm
Oh,
correct. Yes,
absolutely.
with having a higher-
That's
right,
very important.
Right. So that helps us with our interest rates on the borrowing, the debt service. So I think at this point, so you all have a recommendation right now, or you put forth, not a recommendation, but you put forth your ideas of a 3% and just in terms of what that would leave us in terms of
Yeah.
excess capacity.
I really was looking to come up with a percentage that would keep the excess levy capacity where it was. And then I was looking, okay, what if it was eliminated? And okay, if the town, if whatever decided to go for a Proposition 2.5 override, I'll say $1 million, what's that do for it?
Right.
Now, as we get going, I'm going to be asking my Finance Committee members here, as the chairman, as one member, I would like to come up with a Finance Committee recommendation as to the percentage increase that we would like to see in the next budget. Now, whether the Finance Committee wants to go along with that, I don't know. So if you want me to start that process right now, or?
Before we do, I would just like to ask my board if there's any questions or comments at this point before we move on. Does anyone have anything they want to start off with?
I mean, generally, I'd like to see if we can stay within our levy limit. I'd like to avoid trying to push for a Prop 2.5 override. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what I think I would like to see as our goal as we build these budgets and move into the detailed portion of the budgeting process. So we don't look at actual department budgets until, I don't know, January, February. So you see them before we do, obviously. But I would like that mindset, I guess, as a starting place.
And I think, I'm just going to add something about the schools. They're not here tonight to speak for themselves, but from what I understand, from what I remember, when they did the split, the whole issue with moving special ed costs over to the regional district for the 7th through 12th and up to age 22 out of the elementary budget. So those costs this year, my understanding, has moved to Silver Lake. The circuit breaker reimbursement was sent back to Kingston Elementary for the costs for the prior year that they spent on those kids. So typically you have that and you use it for your present year expenses. So Kingston didn't have those expenses, so they were getting the reimbursement. Silver Lake obviously took on the cost for those kids, not getting any circuit breaker for the prior year expenditures. And just for people to understand, circuit breaker, what it is when you have a student who's receiving, or that we're spending more than, I think, 4 times the base cost of education. So I think it came out to somewhere around 40 or 50,000. If we spend more than that, then we file a claim with the state, and then they will pay back a percentage, and it depends year to year, but it's 60%, maybe 65% of what's over that 4 times. So if we spent 100,000, and let's say the base came out to 50, so it's really a 50,000, and they would pay 60%, so we might get 30,000 back, but the schools paid 100. So it's some money that's coming back from the state. But Silver Lake is getting that expense. They weren't getting the reimbursements to help pay the current year. So what they did is they took money out of their E&D, which is like free cash for them. Silver Lake is their own entity. So they have a thing called excess and deficiencies, like free cash for the town. So they pulled out what would be their circuit breaker to make up for the 1 year. The problem moving forward that we knew last year was going to be a problem is that Kingston was getting that money, the circuit breaker, this year without the expenses. So they were able to use it for other things or for their own special ed for the kids in that age range. Next year, they're not going to get that, but they're still going to have the same expenses. So it's almost as if they're coming into this, and I don't know, I don't even want to publicly say the number, but it's a fair amount. So if that is the case, they're coming into to this coming budget season already pretty much in the hole, a big chunk. And then beyond that, I don't know. So it's early in the process. We don't have any information from the schools yet. Yeah, so that's all I really wanted to say. Anybody else from Board of Selectmen? All right, I'll go back to you guys.
Okay, I will open it up. As you can see, Finance Committee members, I have done this analysis at 3, 4, 5, 6%. I welcome your comments and thoughts before I make a recommendation. Mike is the vice chair. You're up first, if you want to say anything.
I don't know that I have a lot to add. I share the sense that it would be preferable if we could stick within excess levy capacity. I think that the historical trend has been that these numbers tend to grow rather than shrink over the course of the process, and I think a tighter baseline might help us absorb to whatever extent it's possible what has felt like an inevitability the past few budget cycles as things creep toward April and May.
David?
So, on your broad scale, or your broad overhead view, yeah, I'm in agreement with Michael. You know, we need excess levy capacity, at least with that 3% increase, which is what, 700 grand. I actually think it should be higher than that, but it is what it is. The thing we're not really discussing, and we'll discuss at some point later, is what does that mean though? So, you know, we can say 2%, 3%, 4%. 4% goes over the levy. We don't want to do that. Oh, don't do that. But then what are the repercussions? We already have contractual obligations. My fear, and I think I'm right, is our contractual obligations, we're already over this 3%. So if I say 3%, we're already going to be over it, which means there's going to be cuts. There's going to have to be cuts if you want to stick to that 3%. I don't think we're going to go there tonight, but there's a repercussion to the numbers, right?
Absolutely.
And, you know, I want to have excess levy capacity. I don't think I'm going to vote for any budget that goes over. But there will have to be cuts that are going to have to be made because I don't think we can come in under +3 or 4. So.
Yeah, the reason I did the 3% by itself, and I said, you know, I just don't see that being realistic. So I said, you know, maybe I need to compromise, and that's where I went to the what's 4% do, and the 4%, you know, gets me to spending every last dollar practically, and I don't like that, but I would, as one person on the Finance Committee, as the chairman, I would live with the 4% with the idea that I don't want to make tremendous reductions. And I would say that at the 4% level, I'm asking the schools to come in at 4%, no matter what the situation is. That you've got to find a way to come in at 4%. And it was only, I don't know, 3 years ago that the schools were in at 2.5%. That it can be done at times. I would think that and that's why we want to talk very general, but plus or minus $200,000-300,000 is when you start taking a hard look at what state aid is going to be, what the local revenues like automobile excise taxes, ambulance revenues, etc. You're probably going to come up with $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to play with, and that might help us increase the excess levy a little bit by having that come in that way. But I do think that almost anything over 4% is going to get us into a budget deficit position. Maybe with these other items, maybe it could somehow end up being 4.5% without an override situation. But as far as you're saying, as far as the limits, the ramifications, I think that's what Keith, the town administration, has attempted to do here by coming up with a kind of a pro forma budget also, which their feeling is to maintain level services. They would have about a $700,000-800,000 problem here, or budget deficit. I think, is that right, Keith? What's that number?
You're right, Mr. Pike. It's $750,000. But I guess I just want to clarify one thing, if I could. What we tried to do, when I say we, the finance director and I tried to do, was put together some numbers that we thought were more of what we anticipated to see for increases. Again, when Mr. Pike and I had a conversation last week, and he had presented the 3% increase, for the schools, knowing that some of the issues and challenges they're facing financially, I think 4% is going to be a challenge for them, but I bumped it up to 4%. We also increased a couple of costs we knew for, health insurance expectations and increases and things of that nature, which is the lion's share of the increases. We also had some discussions with public safety to talk about some of the additional budget needs that may be proposed in fiscal _26 for those budgets as well. The lion's share of that brought us up to an increase of about $1.4 million from the finance director's numbers. It still will mean a reduction in some services. And again, I'm not sitting here tonight advocating for a Proposition 2.5 increase. I agree with the finance committees and Board of Selectmen, or at least some of the Board of Selectmen's opinions of trying to find a way to keep it under Proposition 2.5. Looking at it as a household budget, do you want to take a loan out for normal monthly expenses? Doing a Proposition 2.5 override is doing that. So we should be trying to live within the means that we have, in my humble opinion. Some of the things that we have no control over, those being, we've gone from a $2 million give or take, and I think it's a little bit more than that. I don't have the number in front of me, so I apologize. But a $2 million increase in new growth, we're estimating right now $350,000. So if I had, and that is not to point fingers, but that is directly related to our inability to develop or redevelop property because of the water moratorium. Bottom line, that challenge is going to be with us now for probably at least 3 more years before the new well, if it gets approved at town meeting in the spring, when that goes online and when that's up and running, and we can look at, new homes, hopefully some new industrial, commercial businesses in town to boost our property valuation. So I'm concerned that this isn't a blip, a 1-year blip that we're facing. This is a 3 or 4 year challenge potentially until we are back up and running and are able to take advantage of or utilize the new growth to help us absorb the inflationary costs that we're facing, whether it be electricity, gas and oil, diesel, retirement costs, health insurance costs, just employee benefit costs. Just like you're seeing increases at home, we certainly are seeing them here, and one of the significant factors that helps us remain under the Proposition 2.5 has been significantly diminished this year, which is going to require some creative financial recommendations that not only is sustainable, I guess. We could potentially throw one-time revenues at this and get through fiscal '26, but that is short-sighted in my mind and not good business practice. So we don't want to handcuff ourselves for fiscal '27 and moving forward by decisions we make in '26. So there's some challenges here. I'm confident that the department heads that are here and that will work together to try to find a solution that that provides the communities as close to the level of services as they enjoy now, at an affordable tax rate as we possibly can.
Thank you, Keith. David?
2 points of clarification. These numbers that I'm seeing tonight, do these include any increases stemming from our soon-to-be fall town meeting? Are those numbers baked into here? They are? Okay. And then lastly, on the final page document, Keith, it says summary of differences, town administrator's proposal and finance committee's estimate. So finance committee, this is a 3% increase, those numbers. Your estimates on this document, that's just, how are you coming up with your estimates? Are there any cuts baked in here already, or no?
No. So what we did, again, what we tried to do is, there are some larger increases, in public safety than in some of the other departments, knowing there were some needs there that are going to continue to be required to be at least considered. But we took a look and just said, okay, we know, again, I increased the school budgets from 3% to 4%. Public works and facilities, you see a 1% decrease. That is because we looked at a little closer at where the salaries were and with some of the turnover going on in public works. The compensation, the wage line has been reduced just because we have newer employees that are not being paid the same amount of money annually. So that's how we derived the numbers we derived at. We took a little bit of a deeper dive, not much, but a little bit of a deeper dive than just a 3% across the board increase.
But at your deeper dive, you're over 4%, which means you're...
I have a $750,000 needs for a Proposition 2.5.
You would need a Prop 2.5.
So this, again, this hasn't, and I would suggest, and I know I think I upset at least one department's followers with some of the information I put in my information that wasn't directed specifically to the library. There will have to be cuts in service potentially if there's a desire to keep the property taxes under the Proposition 2.5 and not needing it, Proposition 2.5. So I outlined a couple of items that I would look at and want to make people aware of. One of them was closing the library for a second day of the week, which is great because everybody's here to see this tonight. So it's nice to have somebody in the room. I'm not targeting the library. It was just showing an example. I use the same example with recreation. We pay for a position now in the general fund that the board, the finance committee, may want to consider being funded through the revolving fund where the revenues are going. There's some other examples that I could certainly bring forward, and we'll have to consider depending what the direction this group wants to go in, to deal with providing an adequate level of service, but potentially having to impact the level of service that we are currently providing.
And before people out there get too nervous, I would like to point out that if we were going to go with whatever budget we go with, the two items that will be looked at very strenuously is over $1 million of requested increases from police and fire. That, you know, we're not going to be looking to, at least the finance committee, I do not believe, won't be looking to cut a $20,000 library item without taking a hard look at $1 million worth of increases for police and fire. We're showing on this sheet here, 926K increase, but that's above and beyond the 3% that we've already baked in. So we're talking $1 million increase in police and fire. And if I go back over the numbers that police and fire has been provided over the last 3 or 4 years, it's disproportionate to the rest of the town. So that I just want to get that out. And I promised I wasn't going to be getting into details here tonight, but I think that that's a point that needs to be made.
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
Carl, to add on to that, I don't believe the department budgets were requested quite yet in terms of so what we're looking at are general estimates. These are not, so when you say police and fire asking for XYZ increases, I don't know that that's true, that the department head has said, here's what I need. We're not there yet.
No, that's, you're there on that. I mean, we had,
I think
again,
maybe one department, but I'm not sure about the other department.
Okay.
But
I don't know.
regardless, I think that our budget process has deadlines that we have not met, we have not come to yet. So I just want to make that clear to everybody, like, we're not to the point where we have detailed budgets in front of us that we can go page by page and line by line like we normally do. That happens later. This is merely the big picture policy parameter discussion.
Okay. With that, I'm going to ask the finance committee to get back onto the bottom line type of approach, percentage increases, plus the discussion of the Proposition 2.5 override possibility. I think that we've heard from Mike and David. Deborah, do you have any thoughts?
No, I kind of agree with you, you know,
Okay.
to do level services and, yeah, the,
Okay, online, either one of the members want to make any comments in general?
Can you hear me, Carl?
Jonas, go ahead.
Okay, good. Sorry, I had some audio problems. I have just two things. You had mentioned earlier about how much of the increase for police and fire was due to retirement benefits and so forth. Do we have a sense of how much of the school increase is the same?
No, I was talking about employee benefits in general. The town does not break the employee benefits out by department.
Okay.
So that it's no reflection on the individual departments.
Right, and Jonas, from the school point of view, we don't have a number from the schools, and we probably wouldn't even get a realistic number until December or so anyways. But what I had said earlier was that they're coming into this coming budget potentially in the hole, and I don't know the exact number. I'm going to say 300,000. I might be wrong, so don't hold me to it, but I want to say that the circuit breaker that they're getting from 7 through 12 is around 300,000. But we can get that number from the schools to find out exactly, and that's the hole they're coming into before contractual obligations and whatnot.
Yeah, we're pushing and hoping that we get that information, not in March like last year. It'd be very helpful to get that a little bit more ahead of time, like our bylaws dictate.
Derek, do you have any comments or questions?
Oh, Jonas has one.
Jonas?
Sorry, I just one other thing, Carl. When you were talking about the school roofs and the perils of debt financing those, I fully understand that. there is a school of thought that says if we expect the roofs to last 20 years, 30 years, that it might make more sense to pay for it over the course of the life of the capital improvement rather than all at once.
Yeah, it would be. My point was that I actually use the example of 30-year financing, but whether it's 20 or 30-year financing, 1/20th of that or 1/30th of it goes into your operating budget each year.
Well, the extra cost, like you said, it could go from 30 to 60 if we debt financed, which that's a big difference. That said, it wouldn't be paid now, it would be paid over, say, 30 years.
And that's why I was just trying to warn that we are going to have an additional $2 to $3 million a year of debt service going into the operating budget each year, beginning 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, and that we should keep that in mind when we're building ever higher annual budgets just for the operations.
Okay, I just wanted to just kind of make that point.
Thank you.
Can I just try and clarify something, maybe for myself and some others? Your concern is not so much with the method of the financing, so much as that for a couple of years, we haven't really been debt financing anything, but the budgets have still grown as operating expenses have taken up a larger share of the pie that had been taken over by some of these capital needs, but that doesn't prevent us having capital needs.
Correct.
Thank you.
Derek?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I share the concerns of the other members of the committee, and I think the only thing that is warrants being mentioned is the fact that, and we've kind of touched on this, is that we have contractual obligations as it relates to wage and benefits. We have step increases for existing employees along with a required increase as well. So just to maintain level services, I have real concerns and to Keith's point, I have real concerns that 4% is not going to be adequate in and of itself. I will probably go with the 4% increase, but I worry what that looks like for the services for the town.
Thank you, I understand. With that, I
was just going to say, could I ask a quick question?
Go ahead, Don.
All right. Do we have I understand that this is early on, and do we have a best guesstimate of what level services would come in at percent-wise, so that people understand that when we say 3-4%? Okay.
Yeah, not yet.
No, but it's going to be more than 4.
Yeah, I
can
agree. And, I just want to add.
I guess what oh, sorry.
More than 4.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the bet. I like that. Oh, I agree with you. Just one other thing to note. A couple years ago, we had on the ballot here in the state the millionaire's tax that was going to add money to education and transportation. I haven't seen any additional funds for the money that comes into our district, either Silver Lake or Kingston, in terms of state aid, regional transportation, that sort of thing. Certainly not circuit breaker. But announced today, University of Massachusetts is going to be free for any one of their schools for students in families, I think, that are making under $75,000, or adults who are not making $75,000. So UMass is going to be free, but still our K through 12 is not getting the benefit of this. And I believe this year they were using a big portion of that money also just to help balance the budget. And also keep in mind, we have additional costs with the students who are staying at the hotel. We have additional costs for students who are in the apartment buildings that are over at the mall, and we're not getting the revenue. There's 34 kids in the apartments at the mall. We're getting $600,000 for property tax on that hotel, and our education is between $23,000 per student. So multiplied by 34, that's more than the cost is more than what we're bringing in. Now, obviously, there's car taxes as well. I'm sure there's some in there, but it's not going to be that much. So we need more help from the state. We need to put pressure on the state to help us with just basic education. I mean, higher education, college is important as well, but we need help because we might be in the situation where we're going to be making some big cuts in the spring, heading into town meeting, or a big override that may or may not pass because people are really feeling the pinch. So that I just wanted to mention that. I think we need to keep putting the pressure on the state, on our local reps. And Kathy Lenatra had tried to get more funding per student for us for the district, but we need a lot more than that. So.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that the Finance Committee will not recommend any budget that requires a Proposition 2.5 override.
Second.
Do I have any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Carl?
Michael, aye.
David, aye.
Debbie, I.
Derek, no.
Jonas, nay.
We have a 4-2 Finance Committee vote that we do not want to see a Proposition 2.5 override. And this is just my way of having it on the record for this meeting, on the directions to the town administration that the Finance Committee's position is on this possibility of an override. Secondarily, I will make a motion that the Finance Committee recommend a budget increase for FY '26 bottom line not exceed 4%.
Second.
Do I have any discussion? All in favor? Carl, yes.
Michael, aye.
David, yes.
Debbie, yes.
Derek, yes.
Jonas, yes.
The Finance Committee recommends a FY '26 budget with a bottom line increase of 26%. Of 26%, nice.
I feel like you just contradicted
I don't
yourself.
think I voted for that.
Fiscal year '26 at 4%. And I think that's, really the objective of the Finance Committee tonight was to, get it out on the table. And I'd also like to say to the selectmen, to the public, to anybody sitting here, that at this stage of the game, I see this as very preliminary, that it's like doing your home budget. You start off with you telling your spouse that you'd like to live within a 10% budget. When push comes to shove, you may live within a 15% budget. But I believe that this is kind of our responsibility as a Finance Committee, and as the way the budget bylaw is written, we've given some guidance as to where we think the town should start off with their budget.
I think we should have had Dave Ramsey come to help facilitate our meeting.
We would have been at 4%.
No.
So
All right.
ultimately, since Finance Committee is the one to present the final budget to town meeting, do you need us to vote? I mean, we're part of this discussion as a joint meeting.
I think we do need to,
Okay.
I believe we need to vote,
Okay.
because in the past, the Budget Advisory Committee would vote as a whole. So I think we should, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same as their vote, but I think we should. And again, keep in mind, this is not, as we start seeing budgets develop and we see the needs develop, holes that need to be filled, this is going to, the target could potentially move. We could find that we absolutely need more than what's allowable in the taxable levy, and we'll have to make those decisions later. But I think the point right now is we're making setting a goal, and doing our best to stay within that
So what
goal.
you're saying is we can vote, but flip-flop like Congress? And just
You
kind of-
could do that, but I don't think we should vote for 26%.
But that, I mean, I mean, but that's what I was alluding to, you know, what I was saying, which we don't have the full picture, right? You don't know what the cuts, the extent or the gravity of the cuts for the numbers, right? So we're just doing the best of what we got,
Right.
right? And I think what I'm trying to say with my vote is we gotta live within our means here.
Yeah.
We don't have any new growth. The town made that clear at town meeting with their vote, right? We don't have any water capacity, we don't have any sewer capacity. We want to keep Kingston a quaint, small town, no new growth.
Expensive town.
But that makes it an expensive town,
Yeah.
Right.
right? So everything has consequences, right? And the consequences we're now seeing are coming down the line here. And we probably are going to be having to make tough decisions January, February, March.
Although I was here for the planning meeting the other night, and they had someone come before the board for an ADU. So if we get a whole bunch of people to add some ADUs in their yard, then accessory dwelling unit, so you can put an in-law.
Tiny houses, we need a lot of tiny houses.
And those are taxable.
Yeah.
So-
Can I throw one other thing,
Yeah.
just to put a number
Punch it
behind
a well.
David's point?
I know.
So, the number that we're working with for fiscal '26 for new growth is $350,000. The adopted budget for fiscal '24, which is 2 years ago, was $1.719 million. That's a difference of about $1.4 million. And in the percentage terms that we're talking about, that would mean the difference between being able to fund growth without an override in the neighborhood of 4.5%, versus being able to fund it, not suggesting we want to get here, but being able to fund it through levy capacity at near 8%. And I think we got to be cognizant, I know I kind of keep channeling some former members of FinCom when we start these conversations, but we got to be cognizant of both sides of this ledger, as I know the folks up here are very aware of.
So any thoughts?
You want a motion?
Sure.
Move to support the recommendation from Finance Committee for a bottom line budget increase for fiscal year '26 not to exceed a 4% increase over fiscal year '25.
Second.
All right, any discussion before we vote? Dawn, do you have anything?
No.
No, but I said a budget increase for fiscal year '26. Yeah, I got it
Over
written down for you,
25.
don't worry.
All right, all those in favor? Eric, yes?
Tyler, yes.
Kim, yes.
Missy, yes.
Don, yes.
All right, it looks like we're in agreement,
Excellent.
and we thank you for all your hard work. Does anybody have anything else? All right, we don't have any meeting minutes. Do we have a town administrator's report, or no? We'll wait for the next meeting. Okay. Any selectmen comments?
Just that our next meeting was scheduled for next Tuesday, but is now the 12th.
The 12th, good point. Yeah, so our next regular meeting is November 12th. And then, of course, we've got town meeting on the 19th. Lots of important stuff to discuss at that meeting.
MBTA zoning, playground repairs,
Yeah.
and more.
Do you guys have any comments before we adjourn?
Any last comments? Let's have a motion, please, for adjournment.
The Finance Committee adjourn its meeting of October 30th, 2024 at 7:28 PM.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Michael, I.
David, aye.
Debbie, aye.
Derek, aye.
Jonas, aye.
I make a motion to adjourn.
The Board of Selectmen meeting at 7:28 PM.
Do we have a second? All right, Eric, aye.
Tyler, I.
Kim, aye.
Missy, aye.
Don, aye.
We are done. Thank you, everybody.